it can actually be a very lonely job, but oftentimes you are the one recruiter. January 2022, the right thing to do would be to scale like crazy. It's not like just dropping everyone into a CRM. That's just another version of spam. Previously, you would only have to build one process or system to service both those markets. Now you've got to build two. Geopolitics came to recruitment. They had a role called developer evangelist. What number it would take for you to go back to an in-office job, 9 to 5 it. The companies, the bosses definitely want you back in.
Hello, Hank. How are you?
I'm very well, Chris. Great to see you, mate.
I'll pretend we haven't just spoken for the last 15 minutes. But, we've already had some amazing conversation and we didn't want to waste it all. So we thought we'd press play and actually get on with the podcast. But I guess that this podcast, we thought it'd be a good idea. You're big on predictions. You're very, very plugged into the latest and greatest that's happening in the talent acquisition space. Maybe a good time to reflect on 2022. Some of the key things that we learned, maybe some key trends, and then make some predictions for this year. Some of the big things that we think we're going to see. I know you've already done that, so we're going to be maybe reusing some of your ideas already. But I know we've known each other for a long time. Were you in-house?
Was I in-house? Mate, I kind of invented in-house. What are you talking about?
No, but I don't know if you'd left. I don't know if you'd left already.
No, I didn't invent in-house at all. But I basically did a maybe 2-3 year stint, early doors, probably before a lot of people, doing some scale-up stuff with tech startups in the All Street Shoreditch area. So yeah, I did that. I did that sort of kind of in the early 10s, really, just coming out of that period. And yeah, that was basically the grounding into. That's where I met a bunch of developers, and ended up interacting with a lot of the community from that point, really.
Yeah, because I remember when we met. And I know you worked at Skype, and you worked at a bunch of high growth tech companies. And when we met, when kind of DBR first kicked off, were you still in house then, or had you kind of ventured out to do your own stuff at that point?
I believe DBR started as a result of me. So I launched Workshape about 2014. So I think DBR started as a little bit of a sideline along that. Because I remember going to an event. That was when recruitment events were starting to emerge, I guess. And we went to one event where we had. To be fair to that event, it was a lot of cliched chat was coming out of it. And a lot of us were just stood there looking at each other thinking, this is not actually very valuable for us. And then we had a conversation after that event, say, you know what, is there scope for just a bunch of like internal recruiters to get together on a regular and just chat about these issues we're having? Because one thing that we recognized at that time, and I think it's still broadly true, is that it can actually be a very lonely job, even though no one can really see it often, because it's a very social job. We're speaking to people all the time. We're always in communication flows. But oftentimes, you are the one recruiter. In an early stage startup, you might be the one person doing that recruiting. And even up to a certain scale, it'd be a small team. Maybe you're the senior. As a person that's been senior, you can't share everything you can with team. That's the nature of, the responsibility of management. So we thought, you know what? Is it maybe we should connect in parallel with peer to peer, heads of talent, people who maybe don't have someone else to speak to. Would it be useful to get together once a week and just shoot the breeze and, share some information? That's when that started. And it was, the story tells itself. It's one of the best communities on the planet right now, I would say, in terms of internal recruiters, sharing knowledge, getting jobs, getting whatever. It's been, I think, a fantastic a part of the landscape.
Yeah, absolutely. So you've been around for a while. You've been adding a ton to the recruiting and talent community over the last kind of decade or so. So you're really plugged in. You know what's up. So I guess, we come on to, what you're doing with Brainfood. And I'm sure everyone knows that the people that don't, we can come at that at the end and where people can find you and how they can sign up to that. And see a lot of these insights, in real time on a weekly basis. And, get in touch with your Twitter feed. I'm amazed at how much you tweet. Like, this is like, you're like a prevalent tweeter. I love it. I live for it.
You know what? I actually really love Twitter, and I know it's not a cool thing to say these days with Elon Musk taking over and like, to be honest with you, conducting an incredible experiment on how to mismanage a business, but he's literally doing it in public. So it's like, you can't not take your eyes off it. But a lot of the content that I get that ends up in Brainfood is actually through conversations and dialogue that's surfaced up on Twitter. It's a great information discovery platform if you're following the right people and you're in the right conversations. So yeah, I'm a big fan of it. I do like connecting with people and talking to people there, even though I'm aware that any kind of online space is toxicity and there's difficulties and stuff like this. So it's not perfect for everybody, but I see it very similar to a pub you go to on a Friday, Saturday night, Chris. You know what I mean? Back in the day when you went to a pub, you remember those days? Part of the charm would be you do not know what's going to happen. You might be interacting and have a great conversation. Maybe you'd have an altercation with somebody who wasn't so great, but it would be part of the thing. So I think Twitter is pretty much like that. It's one of the few online spaces that is still a little bit that way. So yeah, I'm still a fan of it, to be fair.
Awesome. So, looking back on last year, obviously, a ton has happened. It's been a whirlwind for the recruitment space over the last 18 months. But looking at kind of 2022 specifically, like, what are the main things that you've kind of taken from it, the main takeaways?
2022 was there's a lot of things that happened that caused... it's unavoidable to get away from it, but when we talked about it at the start of the show, mate, the first thing that I mentioned on that sort of review post was that, geopolitics came to recruitment. We've always had a kind of separable view, what's happening in the world of politics, what's happening in the world of economy, what's happening in the world, how does it affect me and my job, etc. But the reality of it was, if we rewind back this time last year, the market was going as bullish as we've ever seen it. Yeah, it was, we're going to grow by 200%. This market's going to be crazy. We're talking about the swinging 20s, whatever it was called. It was going to be like a half a decade's worth of boom after, the 2 years or so we had of pandemic and lockdowns and stuff. A lot of people wanted to spend money. A lot of people wanted to just get out and live a bit. And we were all like gearing up for that period. Then, of course, we have the invasion of Ukraine. And when that happened, it was like, oh my goodness, what is this? And then suddenly we realized all the sanctions came in, Russia getting kicked off various systems and all this type of stuff. And again, it was like, what does all this mean? But it means ultimately what I call hostile deglobalisation. So in other words, the world that we'd known up until that point was still generally going towards a globalizing world, which was total addressable market, 8 billion people, all these unicorns that were being invested in. That was the size of market they were selling towards. That was the, on the VC deck, I'm sure they're all saying, hey, our total addressable market is this number, which is the entire planet. And then kind of after a couple of months of, the war and the kind of sanctions and stuff like this going in, you realize that actually maybe that the globalization world's finished. We're not globalizing, we're going to deglobalize. And in fact, we're going to fragment into regional blocks, it seems like. And therefore, the total addressable market for everyone is going to be a lot smaller. You look at, say, US sanctions against technology going into China, for instance. What's the outcome of that? It's not just cutting China out of the semiconductor sphere. It means that lots of companies will end up creating a parallel supply chain in order to service the Chinese market, which is 1 billion plus people. And then that company needs to parallel process back to the US market, which is another 1 billion plus people. That's expensive to do. Previously, you would only have to build one processor system to service both those markets. Now you've got to build two, or you decide which one you go to, which means you reduce the total possible size of the market you're going to. So we're heading into a world, I think, where everything's going to get more expensive. All the valuations are overvalued. Every company that's been valued sort of pre-2022 has been valued on the prospect that they may be of global size, globalizing vision. Nah, that's not a 8 billion market, mate. That's a 2 billion market minimum, maximum. So you're massively overvalued. So that has cascade effects because obviously we supply into recruitment tech, these big scale-ups, so the companies we love to recruit for. A lot of the vendors that support Recruiting Brainfood, they supply into those, whether they're recruitment suppliers or technology suppliers, etc. Cascade effect. And then before you know, oh my goodness, the market falls out of what we're doing. Recruiters back on the market looking for work less than 9 months after being the most hottest commodity on LinkedIn. If you remember that LinkedIn post that they posted to say, hey, guess what the most hottest job skills in the market is what? It's recruiters. That was only 12 months ago. And now I spoke to a company in London who's head of talent there, hiring for an internal recruiter, 204 applications for that job that she posted out. Whereas if she posted that 12 months or so ago, there wouldn't be a sausage. So yeah, there's a lot of people now either looking, being made redundant already. It's a classic case. I think it's unrealistic to expect TA not to be cut when the growth is not happening and the companies are pulling back, especially for these rapid growth startups or scale-ups. They will scale us down equally fast, and those TA folks will be on the market. So yeah, well, we basically had about 4 months where we had the boom times, and it's a real shame that that's happened. But there you go.
Yeah, we had an insane level of demand. Like you mentioned, we provide services, we provide embedded recruitment teams, on-demand recruiting teams, and at one point we had like a 3-month wait list for customers, right? And the main reason that we had the wait list was because we couldn't hire people quick enough. We also were having the worst attrition we'd ever had because Facebook would come in and offer someone double their salary, and the reality of the situation is all those people that left for those kind of offers are now been laid off. And I wonder, the question is, Joe, if this situation happens again, is there something that people can do or a process that they can follow to maybe think rationally about the situation? Because it's really hard to do when you're in this like vacuum of, you don't blame people. If you get an offer of double your salary, you're going to take it, right? I guess our thought process, I'm not sure if you got any pressures to make decisions, but was, okay, this just doesn't make sense from like a unit economic standpoint. If we start paying people this much, we know our clients would never pay this much. It's never going to work. And there was a question at the back of our minds, like, how are people affording to do this? How are they going to sustain this? And the same thing across, the valuations that we're seeing people getting. And then you look at their revenue or their traction or growth figures, and you're like, that just doesn't make sense. And lo and behold, those companies in reality couldn't afford it because they've now just laid people off, and these companies weren't worth the valuation they were given. Do you think there's just no way of avoiding those kind of situations? Like, you can't be rational in those times. You're gonna dance whilst the music's on, like you said before. Is there a solution to that madness?
This is where you and me diverge a little bit, because even though I've seen this like roller coaster, I think that the truth is we are on the roller coaster,
Yeah.
So it's kind of like complaining that we've just had a shocking dip, and it's like, yeah, you're on the roller coaster, mate. You bought your ticket. That's what the experience is. So I think if it's irrational now, in hindsight, because we now see where the direction of travel is. But back in the day, January 2022, the right thing to do would be to scale like crazy. Yeah. That would be the right decision to make. The rational thing to do would be scale like crazy, because we still had a period of time where we thought we would have a multi-year boom based on all of that dry powder not being spent during the pandemic era and all of the predicted consumption and growth that we were going to have, particularly with the continuing globalized world. So the world has changed externally. I think everyone's had to adapt. I don't think we'll see the same situation again. So your fears of repetition, I think, are a little bit misplaced. I just don't see we're going to see that scale of growth again. Although technological breakthroughs can sometimes surprise us. Like I didn't think we'd see a ridiculous sort of company valuation go through the roof, but then 4 weeks ago we see Chat GPT come out, and I'm thinking, okay, if they decided to raise some money, they're going multi billions. Right, so we have technological breakthroughs that I think can trigger again this concept of maybe the another new world is there. Green tech, green energy, stuff like that, space tech, lots of things might still occur that would generate that type of interest and growth. But I think what we saw towards the, if we do take a 10-year view and look back on the end of the sort of 2010s, early 2020s, we're going to see that this is the era where it's the end of ad tech type of growth businesses, the end of social media as viable businesses in many cases. And we had a short moment where we thought that the world of remote was going to immediately lead to companies. There was a bunch of companies that were massively valued purely because they were somehow remote aligned. But fundamentally, there wasn't like that much there. And we don't need to mention that many names, so to speak, but there was a very famous video tool that we all used that was raised an extraordinary amount of money. And you look back and you think, it's just a VC tool where your competitors might actually be for free or far less cost. Like, how is that ever worth that type of money? As scheduler tool, similar. Like, why is that that number? Online events company, ridiculous growth. A record unicorn type of thing. That was all kind of pandemic kind of craziness, I think, and the enthusiasm to think the world has totally changed. Yes, it has changed, but not to the valuations of those companies, and they've had to, unfortunately, retrench somewhat. But yeah, as you say, it's a rationalization of things that that probably need to happen.
Talentful provides flexible recruiting solutions to the world's most ambitious companies. Are you thinking about ways to add flexibility to your talent function? With recent market volatility and hiring set to return to growth mode in the near future, there's never been a better time to choose the right partner to help you scale. Talentful's embedded sourcing, recruiting, coordination, and talent advisory services have been trusted by the world's leading brands. Companies such as Atlassian, Microsoft, Expedia, Pinterest, Waymo, and more. Whether you're hiring across engineering, go-to-market, or G&A, Talentful has got you covered. To find out how Talentful can help you, visit talentful.com.
So I guess looking forward to this year, with all that context in mind, there's this shifting economy, this shifting marketplace. What do you think is going to emerge this year? What do you think are the big trends, the things that people need to watch out for, especially in regards to how it impacts people in talent acquisition?
Yeah, I mentioned it already, Chat GPT. I think that has really reshuffled the deck for all of us. There's not a single recruiter that isn't talking about this. I'm doing a show on it. I'm not sure whether it'll probably already have gone live by the time this goes out, Chris, but I've totally oversubscribed, double the number of registrations. It's by far the most interesting bit of technology that recruiters have got their hands on, I think, for a very, very long time. Now, what this is going to do, unfortunately, this is fortunate and unfortunate, because I think what it will do is that it will replace a lot of the work that recruiters traditionally have done, or at least make it a lot more efficient. We're talking about all the copywriting. We're talking about, doing the research. We're talking about getting upskilled on things you don't know about. All of those things that took tons of time, this thing can take really orders of magnitude, reduce the amount of effort required. So that's exciting and alarming in two respects, because that means ultimately recruiters can become much more efficient. But it also means probably companies will eye this up and think, I could probably get away with 5 recruiters instead of 8. Or heads of TA thinking, if I really get my team upskilled in generative AI, I could probably, lose a few of these additional heads and not have to carry that extra payroll. So I think the bottom line is there's a kind of a race I see where recruiters that are going to be highly skilled using these technologies will become super valuable, because they'll effectively come in with the productivity of 2-3 people. It'll be like a small team. But the folks that have not got into it or denied relevance or whatnot, I think that will be basically a mistake, because that it will be very competitive. I think companies recruiting recruiters will start. Yeah.
And you think the application of these of ChatGPT will be like a sourcing tool that enables recruiters to be more impactful, or to multiply their productivity?
It certainly multiplies productivity. It's not really a sourcing tool because basically it's generating information rather than retrieving it. So it's not going to be able to generate you a profile, for instance, that you couldn't source for. So I think the sourcing aspect probably is going to kind of still be a premium skill set. What it will do though is do things like solve your Boolean strings. If you're a sourcer and you want to, okay, you can just ask the thing, or you can have it verify whether your search string needs to be improved for this search engine, and it will come up with options for you. And they're sometimes better. You see, developers are using it to check their code base, to say, hey, listen, I'm doing this, check my code, where the error is, boom, it'll just give you the results. That's a massive time saver, man. And you think of developers using it in this way, you can see recruiters using it in every kind of scenario where you may be typing text into keyboard, which is more or less 99% of the work we do. Then there's going to be some way in which this tool can add value to you.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, one of the things that I definitely have seen, especially over the last several years, is that, and it kind of links into the point you're making about increasing efficiency via technologies of just how your team's set up, is at the moment, I think the way that people have solved, or recruitment teams traditionally have solved, the supply and the demand, we need more candidates, we need more people in the funnel, is just, let's add some more sources, let's add some more recruiters to the team. It's been grown in kind of a linear fashion. And I think there's going to be a much tighter focus on actually efficiency and performance of the team that you have. I am always shocked at the amount of teams that really don't have repeatable metrics for their recruitment team. They don't know that if they add a sourcer, this is what it's going to produce, on average. If they add a recruiter, this is how many more closes they're going to get. And I feel like this is kind of across the board. VCs are looking at capital efficiency. I think recruitment teams will be also looking at, productivity and efficiency across the board. And ChatGPT could be the perfect kind of accompaniment to that at the moment.
Yeah, I get it. Hiring more with less or doing more with less was already a topic pre-ChatGPT. It was already something that was going to happen because everyone was staring down the barrel of 2023 before the turn of the year, generally quite defensive in terms of budgeting and generally thinking, this is going to be just a pretty much hard yards type of year. And everyone was looking, okay, how can I, hit the same productivity levels with less people? And technology is one thing that you can do, but as you say, there's other things that you need to do, which is to increase your awareness as to what is actually working within team. Thinking about team structure, how can you organize the team so that it's more efficient and they're not duplicating work? What are the bits of work that are superfluous that you can get rid of or outsource elsewhere? So all of those conversations, I think there probably isn't a head of TA right now that isn't, where that isn't absolutely the top priority, because I think they're under pressure to deliver against a target and they're not going to get more headcount necessarily to do it, so they can't rely on that period. Where yes, you could solve it by more people, right? I think that period, as everyone recognizes, is no longer here.
Yeah, and one of the things that I've always been really shocked about is, you see the power of marketing in terms of acquiring customers or users in B2B marketing techniques, and there's always been a chat. You've heard a chat, and you probably heard this for a long time, of utilizing, recruitment marketing in the same way as SaaS companies are utilizing it. And there's tools like Beamery, and there's other tools that have kind of been trying to engage companies to think about how they build communities of people, they engage them with regular content, and they're advertising to the right candidates. They're creating these very targeted profiles of people. But it still seems like there's a long way to go there. I feel like there's a massive opportunity for companies to utilize marketing techniques to automate a ton of their candidate acquisition.
Community-driven hiring, right, is another topic that was massive, because I think it's a kind of a market-wide response to the general disappointment we get from traditional advertising, because especially for the hard to hire, the highly skilled in demand folks, they're not responding to adverts. They're quite kind of hostile to outreach as well. So it's like, you spend a lot of time sort of sending emails to their spam filters essentially, and it's like, okay, how do we actually have a permission-based dialogue? How can we have a reciprocal relationship with these highly skilled in demand people? And the best way to do that is create what I call a third space, which is not you invading their inbox, or not you inviting them to go to some place that you control, but a third space that they can enter, like a pub or a bar, right? Hypothetically, and that's what a community is. It's basically an online third space that people can turn up. There's no commitment if they turn up in there. They haven't volunteered to be part of a recruiting process just because they turn up in your community. Can't just pipeline them in. They can leave, they can come back, they can do whatever they want. They have that sense of agency and that sense of freedom. But they might just want to have conversations about a topic that you're interested in. And you see some companies do this extremely well. And they're typically organizations that are themselves delivering services to developers. So what's very interesting about community-orientated recruiting is that they already have kind of taught themselves how to have non-transactional relationships with the people that they want to speak to. So if I am a database and I want people to use my database, and yes, there's some community sort of approach there, and you get your meetups going on and all this type of stuff, and guess what, from there you can recruit the people you need. So we still see this, I think, predominantly with companies that are serving tech people, and have already built that community muscle, so to speak. But I totally agree with you. Lots of companies have failed to do it. They think that dropping in a CRM is the way to do it. But you know what? I think there's a little bit of human soul missing. It needs to have someone to lead it, and it needs to be a trusted figure of the community you're recruiting from in order to do it. So using the previous example of these tech companies being successful, they had a role called developer evangelist. They had that person who is a member of the community join the vendor and then be the person championing the community to the vendor. And that's how the thing works and works through. It's not like just dropping everyone into a CRM and is doing a drip campaign to them. That's just another version of spam, So
100%.
There needs to be a bit of human in there. There's scope for improvement for sure.
And one of the things that I saw that you posted on Twitter was the kind of rise of influencers being used within recruitment and talent acquisition, which I think is super interesting. I'm surprised it hasn't been done already, really. How do you see that? I'm really interested from your point of view. How do you see that actually happening in the wild?
We've already seen an example of it. I guess one of the first predictions I made, and I didn't have an example, but amazingly, a week after I made that prediction, a guy called Adam Karpiak, I'm not sure whether you know Adam.
Yeah.
He's the king of Twitter as a recruiter. He's so funny, and he is definitely an influencer. He actually said, Hung, you'll be amazed, but someone has actually approached me for exactly the thing you predicted. Basically, a company knows that he has a massive audience of ex people he addresses. I believe it's accountants or whatever, and maybe they're recruiting accountants. And he knows that whenever he tweets or says something, like 100,000 accountants might look at this. Therefore, they're going to pay him in order to do some, I don't know what it is, talk about job specs, talk about the recruiting needs they have in their company that is to their audience. He'll be remunerated for that. That's an example of influencer marketing. First example, Adam Karpiak. So I'm very pleased it was him, actually, because I think he's such an add value guy. And he's the example I'm referring to. I think it'll be a very powerful way to get your message to the relevant audience without having to do behavioral targeting, biographical targeting, which you can't do anymore with adverts anyway, without having to do a very laborious manual way of sourcing, finding, and emailing these folks. So yeah, I think this is going to be a thing.
When you were saying that, Hung, it just made me realize, are you an influencer? You're an influencer.
Yep.
People come to you because of your influence and they pay you to advertise their stuff.
Look, the truth is, Chris, I've rejected that label. I've rejected the label because I just can't imagine myself, being an Instagram model or whatever it is. But in reality, the model that I'm using is broadly similar. I mean, I'm in a very microcosmic version of these big players. So I have an audience of TA and recruitment people and HR people maybe, and that's microcosmic. It's not massive, but yeah, presumably. Things that I write in the newsletter, or maybe I do a podcast or whatever, there's probably a greater than average number of recruiters might pay attention to that. So yeah, I think that's a description that is probably accurate, I'm afraid to say.
So we're going to see some recruitment focused TikToks from you in the future. Is that coming? Is that on the timeline?
Oh mate, no, I wanted to do some recruitment TikToks. I don't know if you saw the Brainfood Live last week. We did that, and some people are amazing at it, but I don't have the... One thing that's true is that I don't, even though I identify as a recruiter, right? I mean, as professionally identify as a recruiter, but the reality of it is I haven't actually sent a CV in about 8 years or so. I haven't actually hired anybody in that period of time. So I'm not an expert anymore in that field. And so I'm reluctant to adopt the persona of, I'll tell you how recruitment works. The best thing I can do is platform other people that are experts, and that's how I see my role, which is why the TikTok thing never took off for me, basically.
You could do like some retro version, like this is what hiring was like in 2000.
Let me get some more grey hairs first, Chris. I'm not that old. One of these days, I'll do it back in the old days. Back in the old days, TikTok, that would be quite
funny. And so, we talked about this a bit earlier, but if you were, a TA leader at the moment and you were thinking, okay, all this shit has happened in the past 18 months, so it's really challenging. It's clear that we're in this kind of volatile sector and on this roller coaster, as you put it. How would you be looking to build your team? Like, what would that look like from a high level right now? What would that look like? How should people think about building their team, do you think?
I don't think there's any remarkable insight I'll give, because I think everyone will share the same. I think we've gone through basically 2 periods of growth and then cut back. So if I'm a head of TA and there's twice in 3 years I've had to chop my team in half, guess what? I'm going to be twice bitten, thrice shy. Probably not going to scale the same size again. What I'll definitely do is start diversifying the types of people in my team. Maybe it'll be far less full-time employees than there were before. There'll be more people that are kind of in a looser orbit. Maybe people that were ex-alumni that are still, maybe they've set up their own thing, and maybe they've got the little things you can just drop in. I think greater leaning towards folks like Talentful, RPOs, I think can help provide that risk assurance where, if I don't know whether my headcount is going to be 100 next year or 200, maybe I need 50 of those people being from an RPO, because I'd rather have that situation than then go to the pain of hiring 100 extra people and then having to make an aggressive cut again. So I think basically diversification of employment type is something that is happening throughout companies anyway, but it will certainly happen in TA, and that's the smart thing to do.
Yeah. Totally agree. And what do you think about, there's this kind of push and pull. I think remote work's here to stay. And I think that, it's not going to, there's this people fantasize that the old school people that the world's just going to turn and everyone's going to be back in an office. I just don't see that happening. I mean, what do you think? Because there seems to be this push and pull at the moment. There's companies that our people are lazy and we need to get them back in. And there's, people that are thriving, using remote working. So what's your take on that?
My take on it is remote working will occur, but it will shrink to a smaller kind of percentage than we imagine. So I think you're right about the tension. The companies, the bosses definitely want you back in. The employees that have had experience of working in office and had 2 years plus of working remotely, they ain't going back. There's no way that's happening. I even had this conversation with a friend of mine about what number it would take for you to go back to an in-office job, 9 to 5 it. Like, what would that be? And we were talking, it had to be like double the salary. It had to be like 300% more, triple the salary. That craziness, right? And you look at your own, and I look at my own situation slightly different because obviously I work for myself. But if I was, it would be an extraordinary number that, again, 3 years ago, you'd be crazy because 20% increase, you're there, right? You're doing it. But now our expectations have totally changed. However, those expectations are only for people that have had the experience of working in office and have oscillated out. So the people that have never worked in an office, early entry talent, they're going back to the office. They're going back to the office they never went to because they want to have that in-office experience. So early entry talent will be the ones that come in. They don't want remote. And I think employers will work this out. And eventually what will happen is that we're going to change the age demographic of people working in offices. It's going to be younger. It's going to be early career people coming in. Maybe they'll be then looked after by managers who want, as a condition of management, as you get promoted to manager, Chris, you're going to be in office. That's the condition. You're none of this remote management business. Then it'll be that demographic. The senior individual contributors who've either done their in-office experience and they've migrated out, they've got their own home configured, they've got their studio set up, etc. They've got kids, dogs, things that need to look after. Their life is that way. Then they'll migrate out. So I think it'll be very interesting from a society point of view. Cities should get a little bit younger, but that there'll be a big middle of people that probably will not be there anymore. People like you and I that kind of beyond the in-office experience. But we shouldn't take that as an example for everybody because there's large populations that do not want to be remote, and they're oftentimes the young population coming in.
Super interesting, and I think I could speak to you about this stuff for hours and hours. But I'm conscious of your time. I want to wrap it up. Before we leave, where can people find you, apart from Twitter? Where can people find Recruiting Brainfood, all that stuff?
Yeah, you know what? If you subscribe to the newsletter, recruitingbrainfood.com, that's where you need to be. Send that once a week, every Sunday. I'd say LinkedIn as well, but I'm maxed out on connections there, so you can follow me there, but I can't connect with you, I'm afraid to say. But yeah, wherever you see me there, connect with me. Generally speaking, I try to be able to speak to people whenever I can. So feel free to follow where you find and chat to me there.
Awesome. I'll definitely recommend getting in touch with him. He's got some awesome insights. I never miss the newsletter. There's always some great stuff on that. So thanks a lot, Hung, and catch you soon.
Great having me on the show. Thank you very much, Chris.